the first opportunity to do so, where I get to address a developing situation in my riding, and that is the closure of the Minden Hospital. Now, this is a hospital, the emergency room in the Minden Hospital. This emergency room serves a community, although changing in population, whether it be during the winter months and the summer months. We are just approaching the busy tourist season in just a few weeks, and that's unfortunately when this emergency room is scheduled to close. So as you can imagine, the impact this has had on the community itself. As someone who grew up in Bobcaygeon, I unfortunately had been a client of the Minden Hospital on more than one occasion and was always impressed with the service that they provided. So I do understand what impact this is having on the community. It's not necessarily a decision I support. I don't necessarily agree with the closure of this emergency room in Minden, and especially the unfortunate timing of it. The board of directors, I'm sure, did not make this decision lightly. The administration, I'm sure, did not make this decision lightly. I don't think it's something anybody signs up for, to close an emergency room in a small community where in recent times, the pandemic specifically, healthcare and the value of healthcare in not only rural communities, but in this country as a whole, really values, and the pressure that this closure could potentially put on other facilities. Of course, the closest hospital for many would be Haliburton. Facilities in Peterborough and Lindsay are already stretched, and not to mention at the same time, we are seeing growth rates that we haven't seen before. Many attribute it to the fact that people are moving up after the pandemic to start a life in once was cottage country, and I call it paradise. And I don't blame them. And so the area around Minden Hills is scheduled to grow, I believe, at the fastest rate in Haliburton County. So this, as you can imagine, like I said, this decision is very, very emotional for a lot of people, and rightfully so. And immediately after this decision was made public, I was contacted by the media about this, and I offered a few suggestions which I'm going to tie into the debate today that we're having on the budget. And I've also written the ministers. That was one of the first things they did as well, after hearing about the closure of the emergency room in Minden, was the fact that there are areas this government could be helping in, and in fact could have taken action on many years ago to help mitigate this blow. Now, the administration is telling us that the closure is due to staffing constraints. And I think we can all acknowledge in this place that there is a global shortage in healthcare professionals. I hear stories all across the country, oftentimes, that there are shortages of nurses, of doctors, of PSWs, and the list goes on. And so I think that's a very real concern and a very real challenge that the administration and the volunteer board of directors was having in Minden, and of course, like I said, across the country, that hospitals and healthcare facilities are having. So the suggestions I offered, and there were many, about the recruitment of doctors and nurses. Now, there's an estimated 19,000 doctors and 34,000 nurses in Canada that can't work, and I want to get these stats right here, that can't work in their trade because they are trained abroad. So there are tens of thousands of healthcare professionals that want to work, that want to help address this healthcare crisis, that could be helping in communities like Minden, but are held up by gatekeepers, that bureaucratic gatekeepers, because they can't get an answer on whether or not they can practice in their specific field, the field that they are trained to do. And so I've asked the Minister of Immigration to adopt our leaders' stance on addressing it and creating a Blue Seal program, sort of like the Red Seal program, where trades are recognized for their skills. And we can do this in the healthcare field. But I don't think this government has taken a leadership role in getting the provinces together to agree on a standardized test where healthcare professionals can travel. But not only that, those that are coming into Canada, that are trained abroad, they should be able to take a standardized test and within a decent amount of time get a yes or a no answer on whether or not they can practice in that field. And if the answer is no, what do they have to do to get up to that standard? And if the answer is yes, obviously that speaks for itself. You can then start to practice in that field. And this is a tangible way the government could have taken action. The government could have looked into this many years ago, because this is not a surprise. In Ontario, we've had hallway health care before the pandemic. We had issues with long-term care before the pandemic, long before the pandemic. And so had the government kept its eye on the ball, we might have been able to be addressing this before the crisis and before decisions like have been made in Minden were come upon. We could have potentially had these bodies, and that's a lot when you're looking at 19,000 doctors and 34,000 doctors. So this is one solution we brought to the table, and I spoke to the media about this, the Blue Seal program. Let's start addressing this and getting our healthcare professionals that want to work, that are trained, into that field. The other issue is housing, and many of the speeches today that I've been listening to in this debate have been focused around housing, and rightfully so. In fact, just a few weeks before this announcement in Haliburton County and Minden was made, the town of Minden had a summit. It was a volunteer group, Places for People, arranged a housing summit. And in my speech, I actually mentioned the fact that healthcare professionals that want to come to the area, because Haliburton County is beautiful, it is paradise, probably one of the best places in this country to live, to be, to work, to play, couldn't find housing. So it was hard for not only the hospital to recruit, the municipality was having trouble recruiting executives in their leadership circle. We've also heard from many tourism operators that weren't able to find bodies. And so housing was a real issue. And the fact that we as a country are not building the amount of housing that we need in order to address what is in front of us today, and that is a housing crisis. Now, I'll put out this stat again. According to Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, Canada needs 3.5 million more homes than projected to restore affordability. 3.5 million homes just to restore the affordability problem that we have. And many communities say we don't have housing, and that is true. In Haliburton County, that is absolutely true. Housing has been a massive problem. It actually hurt the economy where there was opportunity to grow, but because there was nowhere to house people for businesses if they wanted to start up, to maintain, to expand, it was hard to attract people in because they could not find a suitable house, an affordable house to live. And that is something the government has failed upon. They keep touting their housing strategy, but affordability has not gone down. Affordability has actually gotten worse. The average mortgage and rent payment has nearly doubled since this government came into power. When the Prime Minister took office, the average monthly payment on a new house was $1,400. Today, it's gone up to over $3,100. In 2015, the average rent in Canada for a one-bedroom apartment was $973. Today, it's $1,760. That's for a one-bedroom. The average rent for a two-bedroom here in Canada was $1,172. Today, it's $2,153. And in fact, when this Prime Minister took office, Speaker, someone only needed 39% of the average paycheck to make those monthly payments on that average house. That number has now risen to 62% by every objective measurement. Things are now more expensive, and Canadians are taking home less. The affordability crisis, the housing crisis, are two of the biggest problems we have, not to mention when we're talking about building homes, building the economy, we also need to include labor into this conversation. We have a massive labor shortage, especially in the skilled trades, the trades that we need to build houses. And so this is something else the government has failed to take into account, is the fact that we should be providing more incentives for those that want to get into the skilled trades. And I will give the government credit. They did include some incentives for those in the skilled trades in their budget, and I thank them for that. I think this could have been done before and long before. But thank you, Speaker.